Okay, welcome to the China-MENA newsletter, another video edition. I'm happy today to be talking with my friend and co-author Michael Schuman, who's a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council like me. He's also a contributing writer at the Atlantic. He's recently published a book, Superpower Interrupted: The Chinese History of the World, which um, sadly I hate to say I haven't read it yet, but I have read I have The Miracle, and I thought that was a great book. I
Thank
plan
you.
to read Superpower Interrupted. Michael, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks a lot, Jonathan.
So Michael and I co-authored a report for the Atlantic Council. It came out, I guess, earlier this month. The report was called "From Hedging to Wedging: China's Changing Approach to the Middle East." I know why I'm thinking about China and the Middle East. It's what I think about all the time. Strangely, what brought you to this, Michael?
Well, I honestly, I'm just kind of following the Chinese government on this one. I mean, it's pretty clear that the Middle East has been elevated in the thinking of the Chinese leadership when they look at the world, and that's why I thought it was important for us to take a look at what they're doing. And it's very obvious that they've changed their strategy there, that they're becoming much more active diplomatically. You can see that by their response to the crisis in Gaza, now the crisis in Lebanon. And I think when they look at the Middle East, I think they see it also in their part of their broader geopolitical agenda. And look at the BRICS expansion last year, the BRICS being a group that's the Chinese government is really prioritizing right now. The BRICS invited 6 members, and 4 of the new members were from the Middle East. Including Iran and Egypt that are close partners to China. So the Middle East also, I think, plays a big role in China's overall thinking about their global foreign policy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, obviously, that's what I spend most of my time thinking about. Did you have when we worked on this? Did anything surprise you about China's presence here? Did you come to it with expectations that were confounded?
Yeah, yeah, a couple things that are sort of linked. I've actually been somewhat surprised by the nature of the Chinese response to the current crises. Uh, as you know, the Chinese government likes to kind of act like they don't take sides. Obviously, they have foreign policy preferences, but they usually like to keep them kind of either not public or very subtle or things like that. And I've been a little surprised by how aggressive they've been, at least in their rhetoric, um, over the what's going on in Gaza and now Lebanon. I think that shows again another kind of shift where the Chinese government wants to play both a larger role in the region, but also they're looking at these crises and looking at the region and is again as part of this greater strategy. I think to appeal to the global South. And I have been surprised at I think how kind of lopsided their messaging has been in this, but I think it's also purposeful. But then that's linked to my second surprise, something that you like to talk about, that there's a bigger gap than I kind of originally envisioned between their kind of their activity and their actual influence or their actual the actual weight of their power in the region. Um, I think they still have a long way to go in terms of their capabilities and experience in the region that I think trails badly to where what you see kind of in the headlines. And I found that a little surprising too.
No, it's a point worth repeating. I think often, so we're recording this on September 30th. Last week, the president of the UAE was in Washington for a state
Right,
visit. And when you hear the numbers of trade investment between the US and the
right,
UAE, and you measure that against what China does, it's a really significant gap. And if you just follow the headlines, you'd think that China's the superpower and the US is
right. That's right.
the plucky startup. And it really is interesting to me how wrong I think a lot of the headlines get it.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry, I just lost my place here. So, um, what is it? I mean, for folks in the policy community outside the region, like a lot of our readers at the with the Atlantic Council are going to be reading this from Washington, from Western countries.
Right.
A lot of people who don't really have a lot of on the ground knowledge of what China's doing here. What is the takeaway, do you think, for them with a report like this? What do you want them to think about differently?
Uh, well, in terms of the report, what I hope the main point that we got across is I hope that we put a framework on events, right? I mean, you can follow the events in the newspapers and things and see what China's doing, but I think what we try to do is sort of make sense of it and see it as and put it into a framework that helps people understand what China's shift in the region really means and how it fits into their overall greater strategy. And I think it's incredibly important. You know, this is a part of the world that is immensely important to U.S. security and European security, and the economy as well. And you know, Washington devotes a tremendous amount of diplomatic resources to this region, as you see what's going on right now with Gaza, and China is playing a bigger role, and I think the Chinese leadership wants to play a bigger and bigger and bigger role. I think that the trajectory is clear. So what China is doing in the region, in this very, very vital region, is just of tremendous importance to American global strategic interests.
Yeah, so having spent as much time as we've spent thinking and reading and writing about this stuff, when you see like Wang Yi at UNGA last week with a lot of his statements about how we'll support Lebanon, we stand firm with Iran. Do you interpret this stuff differently?
Well, you know, I think the question we asked this in the report too is now that the Chinese have become more active diplomatically in the region, uh, and that they're playing a larger role overall. You know, the question becomes, well, what are they going to do with this influence? Um, and you know, again, I think it's become very clear that right now, I think a big part of their strategy is to kind of undermine the U.S. and U.S. policy in the region. I think that's very clear from their rhetoric around the Gaza crisis, where they kind of paint it as a failing of U.S. policy, uh, and um, and I think you can make the case that you know the Chinese government at this stage is at least willing to tolerate a certain amount of instability in the region when you see like they're sort of non-responsive to the Red Sea crisis actually too. Uh, that they seem to be willing to kind of tolerate these types of situations if it serves a greater geopolitical purpose. I mean, we talked about this, and you know, how much influence does China really have to actually address these issues? Maybe they don't have as much influence as we'd like to think, but they do have close relations with major players in the region, and I think it would be more constructive to see them more actively engaged in using these relationships or tapping these relationships to maybe help bring some resolution or play a bigger role in trying to bring some resolution to what's going on. But instead, they seem to be happy to capitalize on it for basically for propaganda value, in my opinion. That serves their greater geopolitical interests in regard to their competition with the United States. So uh, you know, so for me, I think the Chinese role here, from a Washington perspective, you know, has become a little unsettling in terms of what it really means for the region and for the U.S. and the region.
I think it's been really interesting to watch this as long as I have, because you can see different points when China actually does have leverage, especially if we're talking about Iran. You know, there was a
Right.
moment, I think, when Iran attacked Saudi Aramco back in the fall of 2020. Um, I think at that moment in time, China, you know, Iran was economically in a lot of trouble, and China was able to lean on them and say, "Look, your attack on Saudi Aramco is costing us something to the order of $97 million a day, you know, in this premium, this price in oil that shot up because of this attack. We're not going to stand by you. if it costs us nearly 100 million bucks a day. And I think they were able to get Iran to back off. But I think since October 7th, I think to me, the logic in Tehran's been different, where this is an existential crisis for the Islamic Republic. And China offers money, China offers contracts, it offers development, but it doesn't offer an existential answer. They're not coming here with the military, they're not going to bail them out if this turns into a broader war. And I think in that case, that's when we see the limits of China's leverage or influence with a lot of these bigger actors. I think they look at China and say, look, when I need a subway built, you're my guy. When I need somebody to back me up because I'm worried about Israel killing my senior leaders, it's pretty clear China doesn't have much to offer in that space. So it's been an interesting time to watch for
Well,
sure, just because I think you see these ebbs and flows of what China's able or willing to do, and I think local actors have come to realize that.
right, but I mean, you make a really interesting point on this because at the same time when you look at this sort of detente that the Chinese managed to broker between Iran and Saudi Arabia about 18 months ago, they do have enough influence to do that kind of thing, right? I mean, they're not completely they're not totally on the outside looking in. So, I mean, do you think that if they had more, is it just a matter of will? Do you think that the Chinese don't want to really involve themselves in a deeper way in these crises, or is it still capability, or the combination of both?
I think I think China's role in that Saudi Iran deal has been really, it's been great for China. It's been great PR rather. But I don't think that it was really as substantive as it's often thought. In fact, I'm holding right now in my hand, I hope to talk to this person soon about and do the same kind of video chat, a PhD student from Iran, and she wrote this article called China's Marginal Involvement in the 2023 Iran-Saudi Arabia Reconciliation. And she goes really
Mm,
deep into it, just kind of demonstrating what was being done by domestic actors in Saudi and Iran, local actors in Oman and Iraq. And just it seems like a lot of things kind of came together for this to fall in China's lap, and it gave China a really great opportunity.
right,
But I think you're right. China can play a bigger role. I think it's just a matter of, it's that old classic line, like when your enemy is whatever, shooting himself in the foot or digging a hole, give him a shovel, right? I think
right.
China looks at this and says, hey, the West broke it, you bought it. And if you're going to keep messing up the Middle East, it's going to make you ultimately look that much worse. And it's probably an opportunity for us. I imagine that's the logic.
I'm curious though on your view on something sitting here in Beijing. I can't get the pulse of this. I mean, how is China's response to Gaza and Lebanon actually playing in the region? And is there a distinction between the reaction of, let's say, the general public to the actual, the political lead and the leadership in the region?
This, excuse me, this will really stretch us into a much bigger conversation. And my computer says I've got about 8% of battery left. But I
Okay.
think generally, it's, I think a lot of folks in the region feel that they right-sized their expectations about what China's willing and able to do in the region. I think as well as anybody, government leaders in the Gulf and the Middle East have a pretty good sense of the limits of what China's willing and able to do. And I think it's really from the outside where we see these dramatic, events like Xi Jinping goes to Riyadh and they sign tens of billions of dollars in contracts and commit to all these MOUs. And for a lot of us on the outside, it looks really, substantive, like this is transformational. But I think here in the region, a lot of people realize, hey, China's not that guy. It's not going to come in here and play that role. And I think its response to Gaza, its response to the Red Sea shipping crisis, its response to the broadening war between Israel and Hamas and Hezbollah, just confirmed what a lot of folks here kind of thought about China, that it's kind of in that middle rank, extra regional power that doesn't really have the capacity or the willingness to play a significant role in shaping the region right now. but it's always moving, right? That's the, I guess, part of following events in the Middle East is it just keeps on moving all the time. Michael, my computer is almost dead, but thanks for doing this.
Thanks a
Um,
lot,
I
Jonathan.
look forward to more conversations about the report. I'll share it on the post with this, and no doubt we'll be doing other briefings and podcasts and stuff like that. So look forward to it.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.